Welcome back to this episode of High Floor Football. Last week we did a Ball Mania IV draft, and we collaborated, and we didn't even stop being friends for an hour of it. So if you want to go check that out on the channel. It'll be linked in the description down below. But for this week, we are shifting the focus to redraft. It is now we are nearing the end of June, and once July hits, as everybody knows, the 2023 fantasy football season can truly begin. So, for this episode, we are going to go through some of our favorite values at each position. Jay and I have 1 to 2 players per position, and we're going to go and debate some takes and pick some of our favorite valued players. For all of these values, we're going to be using the Football Guys ADP, and we'll also throw that link in the description as well. That's completely free to use, but hopefully if you go use the Football Guys ADP, you'll love it so much that you go and subscribe to the full channel, because it is a really awesome group of stuff that we have put together for you over there. Anyways, I am Sam Wagman. As always, this is my co-host, Jay Arst. How are you doing this fine evening, my friend?
I'm doing well, doing well. I enjoyed our dynasty and our best ball times as well. Shifting into redraft, it's coming up early summertime. So yeah, I'm doing well. I'm happy to talk about some players today.
Yeah, absolutely. And my obviously July is one of my favorite months of the year. We get to shift into redraft content, and we start to talk about players in a current light instead of kind of like a future light. And obviously we've been focused on best ball for a minute now, but my true love for fantasy football has always been redraft, and always will be, as most players are. So I'm thrilled to get into this. We'll go through values this week. We'll go through fades next week, and we're going to be breaking down something every week, and we're going to start bringing back some guests for the next couple months, and it's gonna be a time, man. It's gonna be a time. But before we get into everything, and we're gonna start right away, I want to shout out our partners over at Underdog. Underdog Fantasy, the best place to go and mock draft for some cold hard cash. Use our code HFF when you sign up using the sign up code below, again in the description right down below, and you will receive a 100% match up $200 on your first deposit. That is your first deposit only, up to $100 on your first deposit at Underdog Fantasy using code HFF. Go in and sign up, use some of that money to play a Best Ball Mania 4 draft like we did last week. Again, if you wanted to check that out, it's in the description below. You can go win some real serious money there if you're able to best that field of nearly 500,000 people. The first place prize is $3 million, and a ton of money is devoted to the regular season prize pool as well. So tons of ways to win money over there at Underdog Fantasy. Really cool company, really top-notch stuff over there. And again, that code is HFF. But let's hop right into our content for tonight, since we have a ton of players to talk about. And Jay is going to start us off with his first quarterback that is a value. So go right ahead, Jay.
Yeah, it's a tough choice. Quarterback's always difficult to kind of find the value, especially now with so many of these quarterbacks performing at a high level. My first guy that I would talk about would be Deshaun Watson. I think it's interesting to call him a value. He's going off the board at QB9. But I really think like what we saw last season is not an accurate picture of what we're going to see this season from Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns offense. They added Elijah Moore to the mix. They added Cedric Tillman as just additional depth at the wide receiver. But I think that he just has a higher ceiling than pretty much anybody that's going behind him, besides maybe Anthony Richardson, who goes a couple spots back. But he's going off board QB9. Like I said, it's behind Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence. I'm not necessarily making the argument that he should go before them. I think he's perfectly fine priced. But I think you get him there, you have the chance that he can outscore any of those guys really above him if things go right in Cleveland.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Deshaun Watson is a guy that I have drafted an absolute ton of this offseason as well. I believe he's my highest owned quarterback on Underdog Fantasy. I think he's around 22%. So I really like him as well. For my top guy, I'm going to go with the guy that's ranked right below him in ADP, and that's Dak Prescott, who's coming off the board at QB10. He's coming off only a couple spots behind in the overall football guys ADP right now. But Dak is just a perfect option for fantasy football this year. The Cowboys defense is bound to take a little bit of a step back from previous years. Their cornerbacks have not been that good. So their defense might be on the field a little less, and they might be having to throw a little more. Without Ezekiel Elliott there, I don't think they're going to run the ball nearly as much as Mike McCarthy says they're going to do. Him bringing in Schottenheimer is a little bit of a worrying concept, and getting rid of Kellen Moore. But I do think this offense is set up to throw quite a bit. You have CeeDee Lamb there already. You brought in Brandon Cooks via trade. You drafted Luke Schoonmaker in the second round out of Michigan to serve as a new tight end. You have Michael Gallup coming back. I think Dak Prescott is set up to have quite a good year. And he really had a really down year in terms of interceptions last year. That's not quite like him to do that. Obviously he's not, going to be the 4 interception guy that we saw in his rookie year, but I do think he probably settles back down around the 9 or 10 interception number instead of, going all the way up to 15 like he was last year. So I do think Dak's going to be quite a value. I think he could finish as high as, QB6 this year. So I do like him there, and I think he's a nice value going off that you could probably get in the teens of your draft, teens rounds.
Yeah, I like that pick for sure. I think their offense is improved from last season, especially the weapons he's going to be throwing to. 2 more guys I'll just throw out, kind of quickly. We'll just kind of rush through them. But one was, I was talking to you before the show. Justin Fields, oddly, is a value to me, being a quarterback that is the QB6 right now off the board. And it's purely based on how high these other guys are going. Like Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen are all going in the second round. They might leak out to the third, but Justin Fields goes in the 4th and sometimes the 5th round. And if you're getting him 3 rounds after, that first tier, that Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, there's also a chance, he can outscore them. And I don't think anyone would be surprised if he did. So when you're able to stack up, your first 4 picks and then still come out with a Justin Fields who has that high ceiling, I think he's a great value. And another guy I'll just touch on right before will be Matthew Stafford, who's kind of more of my later bet. Who's going off the board at QB 21. In redraft, if you're regular, like 1 QB league, the only time I'd really be taking him, I guess, I'd probably pair him with another high-end guy. Maybe like if you took Anthony Richardson, took Matthew Stafford later, I think that would be like a fun plan. Or if you just completely wait on quarterback, I still think he's got good upside. He still has Cooper Kupp, man. Cooper Kupp's going to score a ton of points, and Matthew Stafford's going to be the one throwing to him if he's healthy. So I think QB 21 is a great value for him. I'll toss it back to you before we move on.
Yeah, I have 2 guys I want to touch on as well. My first guy is going to be Kyler Murray here, and I know how people feel about Kyler Murray. Very, very apathetic, given the fact that he went down with his knee injury, a torn ACL, or in week 14 last year. But we have heard that that Kyler is going to be pretty okay. And I do think there's a chance Kyler could end up on the PUP list, but a 6-week miss, given the fact that he'll be back for the remainder of the 2023 season, I think he's going to be absolutely fine. And I truly don't think he should be all the way down at QB 22 where he currently sits now. This is the guy who, prior to his injury was still in the top 10 of points per game for quarterbacks. And, he may not have DeAndre Hopkins anymore, but he has Hollywood Brown. He has Rondale Moore. He has Zach Ertz, who's coming back from his own injury as well. He has Trey McBride to come back. I do think there's a chance that if the Cardinals choose to bring back Kyler Murray at a reasonable time, I think he could be one of your sleeper quarterbacks for the year. Again, this is a guy you're going to have to put, someone who's consistent, you're going to have to draft someone ahead of him. But the upside on Kyler Murray is that in your redraft leagues, you're likely not going to have to draft him at all. He's someone you could stash. If you have an IR spot, that's pretty perfect for him.
Yeah,
He could
totally.
just sit in that IR spot for, however long he's out, and you could play your safer quarterback, and then you have the upside play with Murray when he comes back. The other guy I'm going to touch on is Jared Goff, and I've talked on Jared Goff this show many times this offseason. I'm a huge fan of him at QB 16. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I don't think he should be going below Anthony Richardson. I don't think he should be going below Daniel Jones. I really don't think he should be going below Geno Smith, as much as I love Geno Smith. And I don't think he should be going below Aaron Rodgers either. So I think Jared Goff is set up to do really well. Again, he's going to get another boost in week 6 when Jameson Williams comes back from his suspension. But again, he has Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's got Marvin Jones. He's got a brand new tight end, Sam Laporta. This is a room that probably is going to not run the ball as much. DeAndre Swift is gone. They have David Montgomery there, but David Montgomery is not a guy who's going to run every single down. I do think that Jared Goff is going to get quite a bit of time to pass the ball. I think he's going to play some weak defenses. And I think Jared Goff is a fine guy who you could draft very, very late in your redraft leagues this year.
Yeah, great call with Kyler Murray. If you do have the IR spot, that's a perfect guy to put in there. Just fade QB and still pick up one of those late guys and have him on your IR.
Yep.
Ready to move on to running back?
Yes, sir.
All right. So for running back, kind of a guy who's a value right now to me, who I wouldn't have initially thought I would be in on, kind of your boy. So hopefully I'm not picking the same guy. But Dameon Pierce at RB21, I feel like is. Did I pick your guy? No. Okay. Because I know you're a big Dameon Pierce fan. I wasn't as high on Dameon Pierce last year. I feel like when everybody, was, I didn't dislike him. I just wasn't as high on him. And now I kind of expected, and I've been doing a ton of these underdog drafts all off season. So I've seen kind of how the ADP has shifted. And he's kind of just stayed right around here at RB21. And I kind of thought he'd be like more around the RB15 range, which is like Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones. I mean, all they added is Devin Singletary, who I think will have a small role. Everybody shares touches in the NFL now. So I think Singletary will have a role, but Dameon Pierce's offense, I think, should be better than it was last year. I mean, new coaching staff in, a better quarterback. So I feel pretty good about him there. He's going right behind Miles Sanders, Alexander Madison, right before Cam Akers and DeAndre Swift. So, yeah, I mean, I think if he really works on his pass protecting, which apparently he's been doing this offseason, and catches a couple more passes and, leads this backfield still, I think he should probably be going more around the RB15 range. So getting an RB21 is nice.
I really haven't gotten a chance to draft a lot of Dameon Pierce this underdog season. I think I've only drafted him in 2 or 3 leagues out of the 30 or so drafts I've done. It's kind of upsetting to me because he was one of my favorite players. He still is one of my favorite players. I think I'm going to be in him on more in a redraft league more than an underdog sense because I don't know if his spike weeks are going to quite be there at the price that he's currently going at. I do like him. He's right there at a great price. I think the guys around him are pretty good. I'm gonna go with J.K. Dobbins at RB19, who's also right around Pierce there. I think this Baltimore offense is gonna look really good. And we talk so much about the impact Todd Monken's gonna have on the passing game, but I think that opens up the running game even more. Teams would load the box against the Baltimore running backs and running game as a whole in previous years, under Greg Roman. They knew they were just going to run the ball. They knew that Greg Roman did not want to throw the ball, and they knew that the weapons were not quite good. Well, now they have weapons. They have a healthy Mark Andrews. They have Odell. They have Rashad Bateman. They have Zay Flowers. I think that this will help J.K. Dobbins out immensely, especially now that he's going to be 2 years removed from the ACL injury. We all know the spiel about running backs 2 years off an ACL. That's when they truly start to get back to their pre-injury form. We obviously all noticed that J.K. Dobbins looked a little labored and, not as limber as he once was on that surgically repaired ACL. But I do think that this year is the year that he really kind of gets back to it. He's going as, RB19 right now. I think he's a clear, possible sleeper to sneak into that back end to RB1 thing, especially if Baltimore, goes really deep and starts winning games like they should. So he's going to be my first sleeper, first value pick. I'm going to go a little bit further down the board here and take Antonio Gibson, who's currently RB36. And this is a guy I've been drafting a ton of. He's my most drafted running back on Underdog this year. And, look, there's been no creative play calling in Washington over the past few years. None whatsoever. But now they have Eric Bieniemy there. And Eric Bieniemy just found a way to unleash a 7th-round running back in Isaiah Pacheco. He's, engineered some very strong run games in Kansas City, working with kind of basically scraps. And I do think that he comes into Washington and he kind of carves out a role for Antonio Gibson here. We know that Brian Robinson's going to see a lot of the work in between the tackles and, probably a decent amount of the goal line work now. But now that Jared, God, why, God, who is their passing down back? Why is his name escaping me? He was basically forced to retire. He had the neck injury. Jay, who is Washington's
JD McKissick.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew it was someone with 2 letters in their first name. I thought it was Jerick McKinnon for a second. I knew it wasn't.
JD McKissick has been the thorn.
Now that JD McKissick has basically been forced to retire with his chronic neck injury, all that passing down work is wide open for Antonio Gibson to take. That's where he's going to really, really flourish. He's going to get a lot of those high value touches. He should be able to sneak in and steal some of the goal line work as well. And I think he's going to really prove his mettle as a running back. Remember, this guy was a wide receiver in college. Like, we know he can catch passes. It's pretty questionable as to why the Washington offense just did not use him fully in that role the past couple of years. But I do think they're going to this year. And he's just a stone value to me. He's currently going as a back end RB3 right now. I think there's a world where he's an RB2 this season, and I really, really love him. If I have to throw one more guy in there, it's my guy Rashad Penny in Philadelphia. Again, another guy that you really, really do not have to take high. He's going off the board at RB43 right now. He's a guy that if he makes the Philadelphia roster, I get that that's, up in the air right now. One of the current, Philadelphia beat reporters has released a prediction that he might not make the team. I still think Penny makes the team. I still think they viewed him as a low risk, extremely high reward, given the fact that he's looked like one of the best runners in the NFL when healthy. It's just that matter of staying healthy. If he gets onto the field and he stays healthy for at least 12 games, this guy could win you leagues. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's one of the most talented running backs in the league. I don't have to keep hyping on Penny because I'll do it literally all night. Just go out and draft this man. He's another guy you're going to be able to get, pretty late in your drafts. You should be able to get him, in the early 11th, maybe 12th round. And he's a great, RB3, RB4 for your team if he makes it.
Yeah, well, you were going right down the list. You 2 of my guys, J.K. Dobbins I had written down, Antonio Gibson. So I agree with both of those. I mean, I think they're both great values. I'm not as high as you on Penny, but I do agree that he has the ceiling to, if he stays healthy, really pay off in the end. So I'm pivoting with, another player, and it would be criminal if I didn't bring him up, I guess, because of how much I'm drafting him. He is my most owned running back, and Antonio Gibson is second. So, I mean, I'm high on him too. But it's A.J. Dillon, who's going, one spot ahead of Antonio Gibson right now at RB33. I just kind of think all the Green Bay guys are taking a hit from Rodgers being gone, which aside from Christian Watson, who for some reason is going much higher than I would draft him, but that's a whole nother story.
Hey, didn't you hear Christian Watson has the ceiling of Justin Jefferson, man?
Like, yeah, that was a wild.
Don't you like read Twitter?
But yeah, I think that A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are taking a hit from Rodgers not being there, which I think is totally fair. Like the upside of an offense with Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, who we haven't seen yet, is definitely there. There's a significant difference there. But there's also the mystery of what Jordan Love could be. And, it's who knows what the Green Bay offense is going to be. Like, who knows how Jordan Love's going to look. Like, I kind of think it's going to lean a little bit more run heavy if they can. because he's a young quarterback, he's inexperienced. They might not be able to because I just don't know if they're going to be as strong of a team. They might be chasing some points. But AJ Dillon can kind of catch the ball too. He's not nothing in the passing game. Aaron Jones is just a better receiving back. But on that, same topic, Aaron Jones is 28 years old. He's going to be 29 by the end of the season. So I mean, at a certain point, I would expect AJ Dillon start picking up a little bit more work. AJ Dillon's going as RB 33. Aaron Jones is going, I don't know, like RB 16, I think. Yeah, 17. Mm-hmm. So, which I think is fair, but I think AJ Dillon is a good value, and I think he has upside. And you're not drafting him like at his, ceiling. You're drafting at RB 33. And between him and Antonio Gibson has always kind of been a tough choice for me because I think they're both pieces of an offense, but maybe not the bigger piece, but maybe the more valuable piece. So I don't know. We'll see. But I like Aaron Jones a lot as a value. You took my J.K. Dobbins, so I'm going to try and find one more guy to throw in. And I guess I'll just talk about Khalil Herbert, RB 40. So I also think Roschon, Roschon Johnson gets drafted there, and what was he, a 4th-round pick? Everyone's excited about him, rightfully so. He seems like an exciting player. They added Dante Foreman for hardly any money, but also a solid player. I just think, sometimes, and I'll shout out, JJ Zacharysen's always talking about attacking these, ambiguous backfields because typically the ADP is pushed down really far because we don't know who's going to, take the most work or score the most points, obviously. But you're not investing that highly in Khalil Herbert. You're taking a shot on the backfield at RB 40. So it's like, are you taking that or the Roschon shot later or Dante Foreman even later than him? But I don't mind Khalil Herbert at RB 40. And I just kind of feel like every time he's played, he's been very good.
Right.
And yet we're just always trying to find reasons to kind of detract from him. And this should be a run heavy offense. I think everybody expects that, or at least lean run heavy. And I like him there. I mean, he's going right around Elijah Mitchell and Devon Achane, who we don't know how much those guys are going to be on the field either. So I like him as a good value.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. That Chicago backfield is so ambiguous. I could see any one of those 3 guys being the leading rusher this year. It wouldn't surprise me. But the passing down back is going to be local Palm Beach boy Travis Homer. So that'll be fun.
Let's move on. A 4-man backfield. Nothing sounds more fun.
Yes. It feels great, baby. Football season is here. We get to predict all these things that we'll no doubt be wrong about in 2 months. Let's move on to the wide receivers here. And look, I'm not gonna make much of a shock here. My first guy is Christian Kirk. All the way down the list at wide receiver 30. I simply just don't think that he should be going, nearly 10 spots after Calvin Ridley goes. I think the 2 are going to be much closer in production than people think this year. This is truly an ascending offense. Trevor Lawrence is going to really, really turn some heads this year as, he really starts to come into his own. I think this Jacksonville offense is just going to be a juggernaut through the air. I really think there's a chance that Trevor Lawrence throws for over 4,000 yards quite easily. I think there's a very realistic chance that both Calvin Ridley and Kirk go over 1,000 yards. But I think Kirk is going to be a bona fide, mid wide receiver too. I think he should be realistically 10 spots higher than he's going at least. And I think he's really good. And I don't think people say that enough. Obviously, people, scoffed at the $18 million a year deal that he was handed last year. And he's like, oh, he doesn't deserve it. He's just a slot guy. But he turned into both a slot guy and a vertical threat down the field, someone who can run those routes really well. And I think he fits a specific niche in the offense. And I don't think Calvin Ridley is going to take many snaps away from him. I don't think the 2 are playing the same wide receiver position at all. I think Calvin Ridley's going to specifically be an outside guy. That's typically where, he's obviously played well in the slot in previous years, but I do think Kirk has that role locked down. I think that's where he fits best. And I think Doug Peterson's going to really understand that. And he's going to let Ridley flourish on the outside where his route running is a true skill. And I think, I think people have forgotten how good Calvin Ridley is at drawing coverage in previous years. And I think that's going to be a huge bona fide for Kirk. I think at the same time that Ridley's drawing a lot of targets, I think Kirk's going to benefit from not having to see the cornerback one every week. And I do think that's going to be massive for his fantasy value. So, at a price of wide receiver 30, give me Kirk all day around the guys that are around him. It's gross. Jerry Jeudy, Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Drake London, Tyler Lockett. I mean, Mike Evans. Give me Christian Kirk, a guy who we know is going to produce there and is in a great offense to do it in.
Yeah, man, just that last sentence though, just tearing down my guys. Chris God. I was even thinking about picking Chris Godwin after you said that. But I'm gonna pick another guy who we don't love to tout Dallas players on this podcast, but we will right now. I'm gonna pick Brandon Cooks. He's going off the board as wide receiver 43. That's deep for a guy that never performs like wide receiver 43.
Yeah,
I mean,
really
last
deep.
year it leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouths, but it was a bad Houston team, a team that he made pretty clear he wanted out of, and was essentially I mean, he was just not happy. He wanted to leave for a while. They couldn't figure out a way to get him out. So, I mean, there was just not really like a peak football environment there. So, but the years before that, I mean, Brandon Cooks had 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, finished as wide receiver 20 in PPR, like a wide receiver 2 in a terrible Houston situation. He goes to, I don't want to say the best situation he's been in because he's been in a lot of good situations and a lot of situations in general, but maybe one of the best. I mean, he's the wide receiver 2 here in Dallas with Dak Prescott and, Cowboys offense that in theory should be pretty good. He's going right behind Quentin Johnston and Gabe Davis. Going before Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Michael Thomas. I mean, it's kind of funny when you look at all those guys around him. It's like Quentin Johnston's a rookie, so I mean, who knows? I'm not going to rule him out. Gabe Davis, a guy we're waiting on to hit, high upside, but not really a consistent floor. Brandon Cooks is kind of the complete opposite. Elijah Moore, who we're all rooting for to hit and kind of resurrect his career in Cleveland, but still a mystery. Rashad Bateman, we both like, but also, who knows at this point? We're rooting for Rashad Bateman. Michael Thomas hasn't played in a couple of years. Cortland Sutton hasn't seemed to ever come back from his ACL tear. And Brandon Cooks is fine going into Dallas in a good situation. So I mean, I kind of feel like when I'm drafting him and he's my wide receiver, 4 or 5 or something, it's I think he's a player where you're literally drafting him at his floor. I would be surprised if he plays a full season or at least close to that and finishes as a wide receiver 40 range. That would just be really shocking to me. So he's my first pick, and I'll toss it back to you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with literally everything you just said. Every single thing. Another guy I'm gonna go with, he's a lot further down the board. And Football Guys ADP is telling me somehow that he is wide receiver 59. Nico Collins.
I think Sam's sound went off.
That's unfortunate. Did it catch my Nico Collins?
No, Nico Collins, take 2.
Okay. Nico Collins, so all the way down to wide receiver 59 on Football Guys ADP. He's just a dynamite option. First of all, he gets a brand new quarterback upgrade, shiny, 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 in CJ Stroud. Second of all, he's going to be an X option for an offense that really needs to throw a lot. And this version isn't run by lame duck head coach Lovie Smith, who was just basically instructed to lose games. Now they have their quarterback. They have their guy. Collins is going to be down the field. He's going to be working with John Mechie. And as well as Robert Woods down there. And I think this is going to be a pretty good offense for Collins to put up some numbers in. Obviously, we pegged him for a breakout last year, and we were a little disappointed by him. But I do think this year is going to be a lot better for his fantasy value. So at a price that literally is free, and that you might not even have to draft him. Give me Collins all day as a guy that I can put on to fill out my roster in the last round or so.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. I mean, I draft a lot of Nico Collins. I like him as well. So I'm backing that up too. My guy, if we're gonna go like really late, kind of like a last round pick type, is Darius Slayton, who I've been drafting a good amount of. I just kind of feel like he's,
You're
this.
drafting Darius Slayton in a redraft, like 16 round league. Would you do that?
I guess that's true. That is pretty late. I got my best ball brain on, but I mean, he's not like a terrible pull, I guess. But
Okay.
yeah, you're right. You're right. So
Deeper
I would,
bench leagues, everybody.
yeah, if you're playing in super deep leagues, I forget how like big redraft leagues are even right now with all the underdog leagues going on. But I'll pick another guy then. I'll pick Jahan Dotson, who I think
I
is
like
also a
that.
great value.
I was
And
gonna
he
take
might be
him
more
and then
redraft
saved
league
you.
affordable.
Yes.
So he's going off the board wide receiver 40. Again, kind of similar range to Brandon Cooks with Quentin Johnston, Gabe Davis. He's going behind George Pickens, behind Kadarius Toney, behind Jordan Addison, behind Treylon Burks. I mean, those are all guys I think you could make the argument with Dotson. I mean, he didn't play as many games, but he arguably had a better, per game statistical season than a George Pickens did. Kadarius Toney, complete mystery. Jordan Addison, I think Jordan Addison's going to be really good. He's in a good situation, but I mean, Jahan Dotson was really good and is now going into his second year.
Right.
And Treylon Burks, sort of the same thing. Treylon Burks, Jahan Dotson is pretty much a toss up, and he's going about 6 spots back. So I do think he's a great value. He's somebody where I kind of think if he plays, this is his floor. Wide receiver 40. I don't think he's going to do worse than that if he's actually on the field this year. So when you're trying to find value, I think drafting guys at their floor is probably the best with the upside to do much better. So I'm gonna take Jahan Dotson there. Thanks for the warning there on Slayton. I was kind of like looking, and he was one of my guys. And you're right, nobody's probably playing in deep redraft leagues.
Yes. I don't know if people are doing 20 round
But of the
redraft
Giants
leagues.
receivers, I like Darius Slayton.
Yes, Darius Slayton is pretty much widely
If you're
considered the
taking,
worst, and he's like taken the latest of all the Giants receivers. But the stats and like metrics all say he's like the best,
that's my
and he's
tidbit.
like the
Then
one downfield threat.
here's your redraft one. Then, if last pick on the board, you're deciding between a couple of those late receivers, you slide in Darius Slayton. I think he is the Giants receiver I would take, and then you see how those first couple weeks go, and you can easily cut bait and find somebody else.
Yeah.
But I still think he's a decent value for that. It's kind of like a beat the waiver wire thing if everybody's
I feel that.
higher on these other wide receivers.
Yeah, I feel that as well. All right, let's move over to tight ends. I'm gonna snipe you here and take my guy David Njoku first. So I'm gonna go with him. Njoku is just literally the tight end sleeper every single year, and I know this like just take lock with him, but Deshaun Watson is going to be back for now a second season in Cleveland, and it's going to go much better. One of my favorite stats to dig from last year was that Deshaun Watson had thrown 25% of the touchdowns in his career to the tight end position. That's a larger than normal number of of touchdowns thrown by a quarterback in their career. It's usually around the 15% mark. Watson's was all the way up at 25%. And obviously, he made Njoku a huge part of the offense in year one. 20 red zone targets. That ranked second in the NFL. 8 deep targets. That ranked eighth in the NFL. Seventh in yards after the catch, 320. I mean, everything shot up for David Njoku. He was ranked fourth in catchable target rate, which is awesome for in terms of this year. And I do think Njoku is just a very good option. Obviously, the Browns are invested in him. They want him to do well. He's got that 4-year, $56 million contract. That's a huge contract for him. And I do think that he's really going to show out this year. Do I think he has top 5 upside? Just barely. I don't know if he's going to see, given how run heavy this offense always is, I don't know if he truly sees the receiving volume to get up into that top 5, but I do think he's right there. He's going right now as the tight end 10, and I do think he should be above both Evan Engram, Pat Freiermuth, and probably Darren Waller as well. I think those are all offenses that Njoku is a little better suited and a little better positioned with his quarterback than those offenses, and he doesn't have as much competition for targets as Evan Engram does. Darren Waller, he doesn't have the injury issues that he does, and Freiermuth, I don't know what to think about the Pittsburgh offense currently. So Njoku is my first guy. Tight end 10 should be going around the tight end 7 range.
Yeah, so I like that pick. And yeah, you kind of alluded to it, stealing a guy that I like too. So, I'm kind of in on that Browns offense this year in general. So I'm not too surprised with that pick. But I'm going to take Gerald Everett as my first one here.
Yep.
He's going off the board, tight end 18. The Chargers tight end, he's back with the Chargers. And they added Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. And I'm like, this is kind of a whole other piece that I would just go into. And you've known this too. I was just never in on Dalton Schultz. I never really got it. I just don't think he's like a great talent. He was one of the guys that I chose him in our dynasty show as like kind of the worst value last year. And look what Kellen Moore did for Dalton Schultz. I mean, he gave that guy like a top 5 season. I don't think he's that talented. Now he's making like a good amount of money going to Houston. I think Gerald Everett actually is like a little bit more talented. He's more athletic. He's got, better offense, better quarterback throwing to him. So with tight end, it's really tough to find value. You're either taking one of those higher guys that you're investing in relatively high, or you're taking deep shots on tight ends. And, the year Mark Andrews hit, people were drafting him late. I remember drafting him a ton late, and he ends up hitting that year, And same with, Evan Engram last year, going super late. Like last round, you're getting Evan Engram. He's a difference maker for you. So if you don't get those elite guys, and you're picking out of these, you like to pick guys with that high upside. Typically the good athletes are the ones that I kind of gear towards, and guys that have good quarterbacks, because tight ends are, targets in the red zone a lot of the time. So Gerald Everett is my first pick. But yeah, I've got a couple other guys. Do you want me to go? No,
I'll go.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna go with Dalton Kincaid for my second guy here.
I thought you were gonna say Dalton Schultz right after I did that. I was like, oh man.
If he was a few more spots down, but
Kincaid
slotting in at TE13 right now. And look, he was hyped up like really high, like right after the draft and all the stuff came out. He slid down a little bit. Now I really like him where he's going here, and I think he's going to be available into the teens of your draft at this point. And if you're willing to punt the tight end position and load up on guys like Dalton Kincaid and Gerald Everett and Juwan Johnson late in your draft, I think that's a terrific way to attack the position at which there's just not a lot of mid-round talent. So especially if you miss on like Njoku or Dallas Goedert, even on Freiermuth and Engram, I think Kincaid's a huge possibility here. We're talking about a guy who could literally put up wide receiver numbers in his first year. He was the best pass catching prospect in this draft at the tight end position by a wide margin. And basically, scouts called him a wide receiver who was 6'5" and can run faster than 6'5". He's 240 pounds. Like he's going to be a move tight end. That's the position he's going to play. The Bills have basically said they want him to be a slot receiver right away as he learns the nuances of the tight end position. But heck, they have Dawson Knox to play the inline tight end position. They don't even need Dalton Kincaid to play that position for them. They have Knox to do the same thing because let's face it, they don't like throwing Dawson Knox the ball anyways. Saw that last year. So Kincaid's the perfect option to slot into the Buffalo offense as a wide receiver 2/wide receiver 3, behind or ahead of Gabe Davis, depending on how he does there. But I think he's going to see at least 6 targets a week. And there's so much upside for a tight end that sees 6 targets a week on average. There's literally top 5 upside for Dalton Kincaid in his first year. I get learning the nuances of the tight end position is tough for rookies, and it always has been. We tend to overrate guys a little bit, but I truly think that Kincaid is a very, very strong pass catcher, and I think that's where the Bills are going to lean into with him. And this is a Bills offense that loves to throw the football. They don't want to run it. And they've been looking for a guy who could really step in and be that wide receiver 2 for years at this point. So I truly think that Kincaid is going to step into the slot role that Josh Allen has absolutely loved throwing to in the past, and I think he's going to excel in it. And I'm calling it right now. I think he finishes at a top 6 tight end this year.
Wow, nice. You went with a fun, pick with Dalton Kincaid. I'm about to go to a more boring pick that I think is a value, and it's Tyler Higbee, tight end 16. And it goes back to kind of what I was talking about with Stafford a little bit too, and just, dude, the Rams suck. You know what else? You know what else sucks? The Rams defense sucks. Like, the Rams are going to have to throw if they're trying, which they're doing this weird thing as an organization where they're kind of like, no, we're going to just we're going to just try again, with like Stafford and Cup and Higbee and like losing their defense, like, bringing back Aaron Donald, like different things here and there. They're clearly not a contender, but they're also not a team that's rebuilding. So they're going to be trying to win games if they're healthy. And that's where, I'm super high on Cooper Kupp. Like, I take him as arguably like the third player off the board sometimes.
Right.
And Tyler Higbee too, tight end 16. Like, he's not like a super high upside guy. I wouldn't say like Tyler Higbee's going to like light it up. But again, at tight end, you're dealing with kind of that elite tier and everybody else. And like, I don't know, Higbee could, perform to where like a Freiermuth or Chig or, Kincaid, some of those guys just out of volume and just out of opportunity. And he's going, so much later. Like, again, this is one of those things, if you're just waiting till the end of your draft to grab like a tight end or two and just loading up your roster elsewhere, that's where you can maybe pick, a guy like Higbee. You just think of target competition. I really like, Puka Nacua, who I hope is going to be, good for the Rams. That's a hope. We hope he's going to hit. Aside from that, it's Van Jefferson behind Cooper Kupp. And they don't really have like a ton of, great pass catching backs either. Kieran Williams, we'll see. I think that's the role that they kind of like want him to play. Cam Akers is fine. But for those short area targets, if it's not Cooper Kupp, who's, going to garner a lot of attention for defenses considering his surrounding weapons, his teammates. So I think Higbee's a good value here just because of like out of volume. You could see him, especially in PPR leagues, just racking up points, kind of like he did last year when Stafford was healthy. Higbee was like a sneaky play for most of last season. So again, kind of a last round, like throw a dart on him, and he could be a guy that's just sitting consistently in your lineup. So
yeah, no, I totally agree with that, and I think those are great. I think those are great options there. That was very boring. I kind of expected you to go with Juwan Johnson. I know he's a favorite of yours. I also expected Chig Okonkwo to make it into this talk as well. I don't know. I'll dump in one more rookie.
Sorry. Give me one quick point on those guys because I agree with you. But for Chig, for instance, I see it and like the upsides there, but also going as tight end 12, like around those guys. We're also having to tell ourselves like something about Chig, although I like him too. And then like Juwan Johnson, I'm very high on too. You're right about that, but like it's also like a little bit with him too, where it's like, well, yeah, hopefully Taysom Hill's like not as involved. Like that would suck. And like Foster Moreau, like what's his story? Is he like actually playing? Like it's a great story, but like, is he going to take snaps from Juwan Johnson? So there's like all this other stuff. Whereas I was looking at those guys, and when I look at like a guy like Higbee, he's boring, but I'm also like, who's taking him off the field? Like he's going to be there whether we like it or not. But yeah, you're right.
I totally agree with that. If I had to add anybody like really down the board, it's probably Sam Laporta. Yeah. You're not going to be drafting him. He's more a guy that you're going to pick up off the waiver wire at some point. But he'll get the extra opportunity with Jameson Williams on the shelf, and he could arguably step in as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Kind of right away. He's a very ready pass catcher. They have a ton of inline guys to play there. Brock Wright, Shane Zylstra. I don't even know the names of the other guys. They're so far down the board, but I think they'll be fine in that regard. If they're worried about other options, but I think those are great options. But yeah, that's all the tight ends we have. So before we head out of here, is there anyone you think we missed, or are we good to wrap things up? You think?
No, I was just going to talk on Laporta for a second on your guy, because I think that it's really interesting with him. Like you said, he's probably not going to be a guy that you're drafting. You might just pick him up off the waiver wire, but like, I don't know. I haven't been as high on Kincaid, and neither of us are as high on Mayer. like especially with the Jameson Williams suspension, like it feels like Laporta could like roll into this like pretty good
Literally wide receiver
share
too,
of the
like right away.
offense. Yeah, like
Yeah.
if neither of these other tight ends like really push him, and Dan Campbell being a former tight end himself, like they picked this guy pretty early. They picked Laporta earlier than a lot of us thought they would. I could see them rolling him out week 1 as their starting tight end, and him just commanding maybe the second or at worst third amount of targets on like a good offense. And that's something that like for Mayer you can't really say yet. We'll have to see, but he's got a lot of target competition around him. And Kincaid is, clearly in the best offense, the highest scoring offense, but also, a lot of talent around him. Laporta kind of rolls into like, all right, is this just me and Amon-Ra out here? And that could be like a really favorable situation for him.
Yeah, and I'm also looking up right now to see how the tight ends were targeted. Brock Wright received 5 red zone targets in his 24 snaps. Shane Zylstra saw a few as well. I'm looking up to see exactly how many, but after everyone says, oh, they couldn't use Hawkinson. They didn't know how to use Hawkinson, but like these guys were targeted in the red zone. Like Goff targets the tight ends in the red zone. Zylstra four catches on 4 red zone targets. Like these guys see red zone targets. The tight ends in the Detroit offense. So I think there will be a role for Laporta right away. We know that Amon-Ra is not really a red zone guy, at least not yet in his career. It remains to be seen if he'll be merged into that kind of role, but I think Laporta could have a role there right away as a specialist.
Well, it's a different regime than when Hawkinson was drafted in the first place.
Very
But then
true.
also, by Hawkinson's second year, he had 101 targets, over 700 yards, and 6 touchdowns, which if you were getting that out of a second-year tight end, you're pretty stoked on that. Like, Hawkinson was a really high pick, so I understand, like, the disappointment of it. But Hawkinson wasn't, like, a failure in Detroit.
No, he wasn't a failure. It just felt like the coaching staff really never wanted to, like, fully roll him out as, like, as a weapon that he is.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not like, I'm just saying for the general public, like thinking that or saying like, oh, well, like, like what'd they do with Hawkinson? It's like, well, he wasn't like a bum. He just like didn't, hit like he did last year. And that makes it more interesting. But in 2020, he had a pretty good season. So he finished like in the top 6 at tight end. So
that's good. But that'll be it for us tonight on this episode of High Floor Football. We will be back next week with our fades at ADP for all of these positions. As always, my name is Sam Wagman. You can catch me on Twitter at Swagman95, doing all my stuff over at the Game Day and Football Guys. And he is Jay Arsht. He is just here.
Just drafted, man. Just drafted.
He's drafting in his own words, he's just drafting. he loves to draft. And we are High Floor Football. We will see you guys next week.